Let's get going. Welcome to Early. Today, my guests on the podcast are Jay Steinback and Siva Avvaru of yWhales. Jay Steinback founded yWhales at the behest of hundreds of business professionals around the planet that were eager to learn and invest in the upcoming Web3 transition. Siva Avvaru is a successful Web3 entrepreneur, visionary, innovator, and technology enthusiast. He has a degree in computer science and has worked for some of the industry's top companies, including IBM, Microsoft, and Google. Siva is currently the managing partner at yWhales Solutions.
Well, hold on. I don't know where that background came from.
Yeah. Well, we'll do corrections when I finish I want to introduce yWhales too. yWhales is a community-based firm that builds, advises, and invests in Web3 technologies through their 4 divisions: communities, solutions, ventures, and labs. Siva, the mic is yours.
Well, thank you, DSide, and we're excited to be on the other side of the table, so to speak, myself and Jay. For those of you that are also yWhales podcast listeners, we spend a majority of, I would say 50% of our time just interviewing Web3 projects, understanding where their product market fits are, how they're starting to adopt and kind of evangelize the space, so to speak. So it's kind of nice for us to be the interviewees this go around. So excited to talk with you, DSide, here and talk about some maybe conceptual theories to some sort of realizations here for a lot of our listeners that can start to harness the capabilities of Web3.
Nice. I'm glad you guys can make it. And welcome, Jay.
Thanks, man. Appreciate having us. And like I said, it's nice to be on the other side. I've done over 1,000 onboardings of business professionals into kind of, what's your interest in Web3, and recorded about 180 podcasts. So within the last 2 years. So it's really excited to see what kind of questions you got for us today.
Well, that's pretty awesome. I mean, that's unusual in this space. I mean, I don't know how many people are doing that kind of deep dive into individuals and companies. And where did you guys get the idea from?
So number one, I've been in the space for, quite a long time. I bought 100 Bitcoins for $20 back in early 2010. And then there was no use for them, so I threw them away. So we moved on and then kind of came back right around the time Ethereum, 2015, 2016, when Ethereum was coming back on, and just love the space, love the idea of like, this is where money is going to evolve to. And, I don't need to tell your audience they understand that. But as time kind of grew and as I sold some of my traditional businesses and started to move into the space, it became, who could you trust? And there's a lot of people that talk about the space, as you very well know, but there was very few I found that understood kind of how you could take a traditional business, one that has to follow rules, regulations, and laws, and how do you start to apply Web3 technologies? And what we found was in the YPO, Young Presidents Organization community, there was thousands of us around the world that were interested in this, but not really sure how to go about that. So I just simply started holding private Zooms, and private Zooms turned into needing to onboard hundreds of people. There's over 1,300 of us today. And then finally doing podcasts because time zones were always a problem. So we just said, hey, let's find entrepreneurs in this space. And the formula that we do is very simple. Who are you? What have you done in your previous life? What have you built today, successes and failures, and where do you think the space is going? And like I said, I've done that now about 180 times. And Siva and some other of our team members at yWhales are starting to kind of flush out because we're recording, 5 or 6 of these a week. So it's become very interesting to watch.
That's amazing. And recruits or people who are do these interviews with you, are they already in they already have Web3 businesses? Or are they considering it as a branch out for their existing business?
So the people that we're interviewing for the podcast generally have a business or they're Web3 affiliated in some way. So whether they're TradFi and what they're talking about their journey of trying to get into Web3, we interview lawyers, we interview project managers, developers, investors, VCs. So really we kind of look at it from our community is entrepreneurs, business owners, and wants to either build companies or migrate their companies into utilizing Web3 technologies. And again, our core thesis is how do you get to that billion users? How do we get to main adoption? And we just take a different approach than I think a majority of Web3 does, and that we believe it's going to come from traditional businesses bringing their clients over without them even knowing that Web3 is being utilized in the background.
Yeah, and maybe to build off of that, what we're finding here, DSide, is we're getting a significant amount of traction via our podcast, unintentionally. Well, maybe intentionally. There's always a selfish layer of intent there, but from an education and an information mechanism, so to speak, the core intent of the podcast was to, hey, we have a lot of people asking us, what does this mean? And when you're a seasoned, let's say you're a Fortune 500, Fortune 2000 CTO or CEO or COO, and you have a engineer that just stumbled across something novel. Let's say you're a data play and they just say, hey, have you thought about ZK proofs? And a CEO goes, wait, what is a ZK proof? What is a zero knowledge proof? What does this mean for me? What does this mean for my company? Ideally, we would have interviewed a company or a startup that has leveraged ZK proofs, a novel technology in Web3, and applied that to their operating model or their business model, whether that's either incorporated in their existing product stack or a capability or competitive advantage to their own product that they can go and develop or deploy into their industry. And so we found that our podcasts are actually, we initially thought that the target demographic was going to be people that wanted to better understand specific Web3 projects. And what we're actually finding is we're getting a lot of traction from traditional executives that are interested around core capabilities and just want to learn how it's being applied. And so what we're finding is a lot of Web2, traditional executives starting to engage with us. And we're thinking about here potentially running off a parallel series of interviewing Web2 executives and talking about novel Web3 concepts, and then conceptually thinking about how those might be applied to existing industries. A pretty big content gap that doesn't exist today. And we have the network to do so. So it's just a matter of putting that together.
To get right to a difficult question, I guess, a challenging question. Have you seen in recent months, there's definitely some aversion to Web3, particularly with traditional companies, fear, regulation, scams, whatever else. How has that affected the types of folks that you're speaking with?
So we host a lot of private events. So we have a deep dive every week where we take a single topic and just really go as granular as we can. And then we have our Friday firesides, and firesides are designed for essentially this week in Web3, regulation, cryptocurrency, AI, blockchain, smart contract, you just name it. We're going to talk about it, and we bring on guests that
the good and the bad.
Yeah, the good and the bad. It doesn't matter. It's here's
you
the
have
week.
to talk about the bad, right?
Yeah, the last few weeks have been bad. But I think one of the interesting things I can say is that about 2 weeks ago we had on 3 what I would say very mature startups in the space. Yep. So they're over a year. One of these was doing over $11 million in sales last year of NFTs. And what we're finding that it doesn't matter how seasoned they are. This one gentleman had raised over $250 million in his career. And never before had he seen such a drying out of capital. So we all hear about this dry powder that's sitting off to the side. And it's really just kind of causing some major issues in the US markets. So there's a lot of investors that are going overseas in a variety of ways where the regulations are more clear. We talk about MiCA and everything else that's coming down the pipe. But the challenge that we're definitely seeing on the US side is companies are leaving. And I think it's a real problem that we're going to be facing here soon. So yes, it's not good.
And a lot of existing companies, if they had Web3 perspectives or strategies for, Q1 of 2023, or even any point of this year, have halted. Because if you are a US based company, what we thought was the Wild West before is now you're automatically on, Gensler's hit list, right? And so the US SEC, the intent is to provide a more secure and safe environment for investors to operate within. But what they're inherently doing is pushing away what was a burgeoning Web3 technology frontier of innovation within the US, and they have pushed that overseas. MiCA was a huge inflection point last week. We knew that was coming down the pipe, but to have an overwhelming pass, I think it was like 517 to 78, that says, the EU said, hey, our doors are open. We've released this regulatory framework on how digital assets, blockchain-based, alternative investments could be treated. And now it is up to all the individual member countries to establish their own precedent on how we are going to operate within this environment. Come over here, bring your business. If you've got a 50 mil P&L that's going to pursue Web3, don't stand up in the US. Come here in, Germany or if Brexit, come in the UK,
Yep.
right? So somewhere in the EU. And we're seeing from an advisory perspective, especially, similar to Bankless Consulting, that a lot of companies that were positioning a pilot of Web3, Fortune 2000 companies, are now repositioning these to be EU-based initiatives. And, that's just the reality of the environment we're sitting in here at the end of, or the beginning of Q2 of 23.
Yeah, it's a shame because I think if you speak with most founders, most serious people in Web3, we want regulation. We want to understand what the regulations are going to be. Tell us the rules. We'll play the game. Whatever the game is, tell us the rules, and we'll adapt our business to the rules of the game. Without actually knowing those things.
Well, and I think there's an argument to be made that the rules do exist. And that if you look at some of the things that Gensler said, and I'm not saying I agree with him or disagree with him. I'm just saying, he used the car example. Every car has to have seatbelts and airbags. Doesn't matter if it's electric, gas powered, or dog shit powered. It's just you gotta make the thing work. And I think that there are ways to make that happen. The challenge is that most of the companies that exist today launched with this thought in their head that, hey, we're going to get there to new regulations, that, blockchain isn't a one-to-one conversion of TradFi services. So you can, hey, we're going to get close enough. We're going to KYC, we're going to AML, we're going to be close to OFAC and all these other things. But they weren't being specific down to the nitty gritty, which is having banking licenses, and the things that Gensler is now saying. Well, you could have done this. Well, no, you can't. No, they're not issuing new banking licenses, and that precludes almost any startup from being able to do so. So it's not fair, but his argument isn't wrong. It's just not competitive in the world's marketplace.
Right. All right. Let's talk about your business, because you guys are doing fun stuff. This is the legal stuff. We got that out of the way, right? So. What are some of the cooler ideas that you've seen so blockchain technology obviously is, the potential is endless. What are some of the cooler things that you've seen in the last month?
So let me give just a real quick overview of what we do, because we have the communities, and we talked about that. Yep. But what happens really quick when you run a community, and you guys understand this, we also have our yWhales venture capital arm. So we're launching a fund out of the Caymans. We have solutions, which is run by Siva here, and basically professional consulting and basically building. And then we have labs. So we've got a metaverse that we're building and a lot of other projects there. And then we're launching a much larger one, digital assets. So that's the actual regulation and digitization of securities on chain. But I would say, the things that we're seeing, across the board from all of these different verticals, is tying back to real world assets. I would say that we've seen much less of the, hey, we're going to make a thing, and that thing, because it's digitally scarce, is going to create more value. That bull run is kind of over for right now. Yeah. But what we're seeing, and what I think is so incredible, is the concept of eliminating paper in the global financial system. And that's something that I think that all of us can be passionate about, is that why do I need a piece of paper as a title for my car? Why do I need, all these paper transactions and paper signatures? And so we're seeing a tremendous amount of innovation that people will never really know is happening on the back end, but is utilizing smart contracts, blockchain technologies, bridges, all the things that we hold near and dear to our heart in the background of some very, Web 2 looking solutions. So that's the things that get me excited.
Yeah. And I'll try to, work around some NDAs here and not get in my slaps wrist by compliance here. But, what Jay just mentioned and how that's actually transferring into an actual real project with real utility. We have a stealth project right now where we're actually looking, within the residential real estate industry. So when you think about blockchain use cases and people talking about industries that this can target, what comes top of mind is usually those industries that currently have a major pain point in data fractionalization or data siloing, right? Yeah. So you have these industries that have been built because you have primary data platforms or companies that have monetized and have become the go-to sources of data that support support all of the different platforms of that industry, and that's their go-to business model. And where we think that blockchain or distributed ledger technologies could really provide a capability or an enabler for almost any industry that has any sort of issue where data is living within one entity is, I like to say this is a personal thesis, decentralization of a blockchain is actually the best mechanism for the centralization of an entire industry. So let's think about residential real estate here real quick, because this is kind of along the lines of one of our projects. Within a home buying experience for yourself, I don't know if you bought a home or if you originated a loan, but that's a topic that everyone's familiar with, right? You go and you submit your application. Let's say it's Bank of America for a loan, and there's these concepts of human touches within an origination process, within a mortgage process, and all that time that's being spent, right? Verification of assets, verification of income, verification of employment, verification credit, blah, 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 blah. That's on average 15 days waiting time for a human to manually validate financial information that I have to go and resubmit for anything, right? Not just a mortgage, but the same information I supply to a mortgage, I also supply to an auto loan or to a personal loan. And why am I continuously resubmitting this? Why can't this be centralized? Well, this is a great idea of one of our projects where you create sort of that singular data payload, so to speak, self-sovereign identity or self-sovereign financial identity. I should have the ability to have one identity, Siva. It's annually updated, right? And all now that's being checked is, hey, do you have access to my singular identity? And now I have a score, or I have a risk profile that could be directly underwritten against by a lender. There's no involvement of a proprietary FICO score that we have 50% visibility into. We don't know what the algorithm is taking into account. Smart contracts are amazing there, right? Because now we can instantly attest data valid attributes of myself to potentially expedite the origination process. Think of the real world applicability there. We could reduce the amount of time it takes for you to close on a house by 50% in an instant low hanging fruit win if we just automated simple verification of data, right? And that's an example of a project. And hopefully I did a good job without revealing too much info.
Well, you did a good job. No, it's a great explanation, and I think that use case also applies to so many other things. You can essentially like extrapolate that out to healthcare, to other records of I guess credentialing and other capabilities. I mean, I think that's being done as other similar applications are being done.
Yeah, no, I mean, the important thing that I think that all of us need to kind of realize is we're all in this together. And that's one of the big points that yWhales makes is that, while we have our own venture capital fund, we also have probably a dozen other venture capital funds that are inside yWhales, that we have our solutions arm, but we also have about four or five other consultancies that are inside there. And my point is always to everyone is stop the infighting. We're all in this together. We're all trying to get the same goal, the same outcome, which is global adoption. And here's the way I look at it. And again, it's just from talking to a lot of, people that are much smarter than me. We hit $3 trillion market cap. The peak of the peak, we hit 3 trillion and it came crashing down. That's nothing. There's banks that are bigger than that are imploding this year. So, if we want to get to the real numbers, which is, cryptocurrency market caps that are, 50, 100, 200, 300 trillion dollars. And I say those, and I'm not joking around. There's over $500 trillion of assets around the world that are sitting on paper that really do belong in blockchain.
Yeah.
But it's got to be legal, it's got to be compliant, and it's got to be a safer system than what's happening there today. And I would argue that no one has made a wallet that's safer. No one has kind of solved the onboarding problems of Web3. But that doesn't mean that we're not going to. It just means we're still early.
Sure. Besides wallet, first thing I was thinking of was wallet technology and security and things like that. What other challenges do you see? in development of that kind of infrastructure?
I think a big thing is right now, a lot of the technology or a lot of the concepts are being driven by the degens, which is great, right? You need that thought leadership. You need that pressure testing. You need the people that can push the envelope that are not inhibited by constraints. But the real inflection point of adoption is not going to be the Facebook equivalent, going on chain and all of a sudden bringing 10 million users. I think that's a common narrative right now in the public discourse is if only a handful of brands would enter and take Web3, it would be more serious. But hey, Nike just made $186 million in revenue last year just off of NFTs. How much bigger do you need to get than that? It's just a proof point, right? What you really need to have to enter the space to really drive adoption is those very companies that really made their data monopolies in Web 2 to start to look at the space in Web 3. And they're going to plant their flag, right? Because let's say Google, for example, and you have a host of Web3 initiatives that are doing decentralized file storage, or you have decentralized networking or decentralized node infrastructure, right? But most of that infrastructure today is compiled and consolidated by the major data platforms, right? AWS's, Azure's, Google Cloud, right? And until they take a purview to onboard the major enterprises, a lot of people are also, at least my personal view is there is this point of going D2C, direct to consumer, or B2C, business to consumer. But the real driver is going to be when you start building the infrastructure rails for other businesses to operate on that don't know that really it's Web3. It is just an amplifier to the existing business model. That's the light bulb. That's the switch.
Right. Aren't there don't you see companies like Google? I mean, Apple has demonstrated basically being de-incentivized to participate in Web3 by not allowing certain apps, Web3 type apps in the App Store because of the potential, to take away business from them. Why would they want to decentralize ownership of their businesses? And I think there are good answers to that question.
I would say right now, Google and all of them are actually putting a ton of money behind it. They just don't like the current state of affairs. If you look at it from a business perspective, like an established business, why would you dip your toe in the water right now? You can be Bitcoin, and there's plenty of companies that are into Bitcoin. And before I get all the other ones mad at me, let's just be clear that 99+% of all ECR20 tokens are garbage. And so if you go by that, we're talking about people that have these are real companies with real jobs, with real salaries, with real, like responsibilities and fiduciary responsibilities. And if you're looking and saying, hey, should we enter this space where there's a 99% failure rate, there's, so much possibilities for, and I say scams, and I don't mean like, look, we understand the blockchain, we understand transparency and all that other stuff. But when you don't know who you're playing with, and you have to, from a regulatory standpoint, it's just not ready. And I would say that, to build off Siva's example, we're so early. And I think that, in the bull run, we're all like, oh my God, we're almost there. When I talk to people that have been in the space for a long time, we're literally stuck at like 1994, 1995. Right. Like we're kind of now evolving. There's no major, enhancements. That's kind of been like that moment where you suddenly go, oh my God, I got it. We're all in Web3. I think Web3 is going to really disappear into the background. Because when you go to a website, no one says like, hey, this website is loading. Let me see, is this Azure or, S3 or who's hosting the site? Because I only use Azure websites. And that's right now what's happening right now. It's like, I'm Ethereum, I'm Solana, there's all this infighting over which chain you're on. And I'm going to be really clear about everything we're talking about with the big institutions. They don't care. They want the cheapest, fastest, most, prevalent technologies that will enhance their business use cases while decreasing their risk metrics. And it's argued that we're all going in the right direction. But there's no incentive for them to jump in and use these technologies today, other than doing some, fun trials and NFT sales and everything else.
Yeah. And speaking of NFT sales, what are your thoughts on the NFT loyalty programs that have sprouted so far. So Starbucks, and I'm saying the big ones. You know, obviously there's smaller scale stuff.
Yeah,
are they doing it right? Are they, you know, would you do it differently?
Well, I think the Starbucks loyalty program is a great first attempt. I don't know if any of you have been able to test the Odyssey beta. I test the Odyssey beta just as a fact finding thing from a consulting perspective, but it's a great first attempt. You know, there's some new novel concepts, you know, around game theory and incentivization that Starbucks has deployed that we haven't really seen prevalent in loyalty programs before. I worked on Lululemon's loyalty program 2 years ago, and that's a very standard, you know, you purchase X amount, you are rewarded with X points, right? And, you know, you can go and contribute. But the interesting thing about Starbucks, and it's going to be a big issue for a lot of companies that think they can replicate what Starbucks has done, is that Starbucks has a significant consumer market share of attention. You have Starbucks loyalists and maxists that will do anything and purchase anything that is Starbucks because of their loyalty to the brand. And Starbucks has inherently or unintentionally or intentionally created a community in the way that we understand Web3 communities around their brand to lower their customer acquisition cost, right? And to improve customer retention strategies, and deploying that loyalty program as a bolt-on to their existing operating model was a fantastic strategy. And so other brands of that size or that scale, Nike is one, for example, if they rolled out a loyalty program, because you have people that are just sniping shoes right now. They want the latest Jordans, right? You have these brands that if they're driving FOMO, luxury handbags, right? You know, if I want the newest YSL for my wife, or the newest Chanel or Louis Vuitton, you can the loyalty programs, especially modeled around in a similar fashion of Starbucks, is a great attempt, but it's not there yet, right? Because we still have this unknown. If you start taking loyalty programs and start converting it to cash or outside of your walled garden, is that a security, right? That's a topic that no one knows. So everything is closed within your garden. Maybe if you have a specific partner, let's say I'm Starbucks and I partnered with Nike, and now you go and purchase, you know, 10 Starbucks NFTs, and that allows to a 50% discount on your order of, you know, the new Jordan lows, ones. Maybe that's a great opportunity of what we would call a partner channel strategy, right? But no one's really, outside of Starbucks and a couple of major brands, no one's really exploring that just yet in terms of how do we push the envelope of what an enhanced customer experience or user experience means to create a much stronger customer acquisition strategy for my brand, right? And I think that's the type of discussion that needs to occur. Take the CMO level marketing, right? And then take the chief strategists of these companies, think about how they acquire customers or penetrate new markets, and then you weave Web3 into that. That's the conversation that needs to happen, not let's go deploy 10,000 NFTs and see how many people buy these and sell it, and let's go push Twitter things about it. And then it might appreciate on the secondary market, and there's no value to us on that, right?
Yeah, no, great take. I think that, you know, NFTs definitely went down I don't want to say the wrong road, you know, last year, the year before, but definitely like was a huge head fake for what's really going to happen with NFTs. You know, there's so many possibilities in marketing collaborations, gatekeeping, and, you know, all kinds of applications that the initial use case of art for NFTs was just a tease.
Man,
well,
but, you know,
I think it was really interesting to watch. I mean, and we watched
Absolutely.
this from
or to lose money
I mean,
on. Also.
And
really
let's be clear, I know people that have spent millions of dollars on a single NFT,
right?
And made, you know, millions of dollars off single NFTs. You know, we you name it. If it's an NFT out there of anything, we've talked to them. Aortist, you know, some of the largest collectors on the planet. But the way I look at NFTs, if I take a few steps back and I talk to companies, it's a key. What is it? What does it do? What does it unlock? And I think that as soon as we can get past the novelty of like, it's a thing, like, you know, I always laugh when people are like, it's just a JPEG, right? I'm like, that's the visual representation of it. What you're seeing right here is like, these are our NFTs. Like, so they're GLBs, they're motion. Like, we've made them as complicated as we could, not because we think that they're going to have any, crazy value in the future. We just want to push the technology.
Yeah.
But the visual technology is literally like 10% of what these things can do, if even that. Like, the bigger backend is, what does that provide you access to? How is that known in your communities and where you're going? And so I look at everything that we're doing now is we're still just trying to figure out what this stuff is. And it's very similar. I'm going to age myself here. It's very similar to what was happening in the early to mid 90s with Web 1. Like, the comparisons that I can draw between what I went through, kind of onboarding people into Web 1. Like, I taught people how to use like a computer for the first time. Like, you're going to turn it on. Here's how you do email. Here's how you send and receive. And it's the exact same thing I'm doing now with like, here's how you make a wallet, and here's how you send and receive crypto. And people are like, well, hold on, wait. And you think, wait, email's like super easy. I mean, I could give you a gazillion examples of like the painstaking efforts that we went through to teach people to use email at an enterprise level scale. And I can say that if you send a bad email, the worst thing that's going to happen is like, you might like, oops, whatever the case is. You do something wrong with cryptocurrencies or assets, that's a major problem for a company. So I can understand their hesitancy to want to get these things out there. And by the way, just real quick, as another note on regulation, every one of those NFTs that Starbucks mints has to be inventoried and accounted for. They are legally responsible for all of those because they do have some value in some way. So you inventory them, you have to store them, you have to account for them. If you burn them, you have to write that off. Like, there is so much on the back end that happens on corporate NFT projects that most people have no idea.
Yeah, I mean that's a challenge. That's going to be a challenge for smaller companies. I think with anyone who reports taxes is accountable, right? So I mean there's going to be a whole cottage industry just in the legal side and the accounting side. Obviously it's already sprouting. Do we need more lawyers? In Web3, we do, unfortunately, but we do, just because there are so many legal challenges that every Web3 business is up against. I don't know. Do you guys...
and as a quick point of advice on legal, I would say that there's clearly not enough legal experts in Web3.
That's for sure.
And I can say that when we were going to incorporate yWhales, I met with over a dozen lawyers around the world. And we eventually settled on one, but I would say that it was very easy in a lot of these conversations to be like, no, I have no interest in following through with what you said. I'm not a lawyer, but that's not correct. And so I would say that as you're looking for lawyers and you want to do something novel, you want to do something new and a little expansive, only choose a lawyer that's done it before. If a lawyer say it's defendable, if they say, hey, we feel this is winnable in court, go ask Coinbase, Kraken, and all these guys how well that's working out. Sure. Because it's defendable, but that means you're going to go to court, and you may or may not win when you get to that battle. And so it's one of the things we deal with. We've on our podcast, we interview many lawyers, IP lawyers, what is the IP around these NFTs? The Bored Apes is very different than a variety of the other ones, but sure. At the end of the day, all of it is floating out there and is easy to be stolen just the same as traditional artwork is.
Yeah. I mean, and not even just NFTs. I mean, think of AI right now and the implications, right? That's what was all Web3's experts from last year are now AI ChatGPT experts this year. And we had a very awesome lawyer on our podcast a couple of days ago that we just pushed out. And we were talking about the implications of AI and what that means from a copyright or an IP perspective, right? And right now, the current legal precedent is around that concept of human authenticity. And so what does that implicate for companies? Go on WeFunder right now, and there's a handful of companies that have been spun up because they were ChatGPT code bases. Someone saw an opportunity, created it, developed some IP, and now want to go and sell the company off. Well, that's AI-generated IP. That is not human-generated IP. So where do the lines of demarcation start to evolve, right? And who is the rightful owner? Did you create that? Since that code was created in ChatGPT, is OpenAI technically the owner of that IP because their platform is essentially the component that created the code, the IP.
Yeah. Yeah.
without any sort of, you didn't enter an MSA, you didn't enter a contract. I'm sure when you click the T's and C's, there's probably some language in there, that maybe says OpenAI or maybe
Sure.
not. I haven't read it, but
Yeah, I
right,
don't know.
conversations such as that are starting to prop up here, and even more so tenfold in Web3 and crypto and tokenization of assets, right, and distributed ledger, node infrastructure, all that good stuff, right? And so when Jay says we are so early, we are really early. I know on Web3 social media, crypto Twitter, the Discords, everyone it seems like, man, we're already past the peak of the roller coaster,
right.
and now we're late. But I go and do chapter speaking engagements with YPO chapters all over, and these are little pods of 50 or so executives that are trying to understand the space. And we do the traditional, this is Web 1, this is Web 2, this is Web 3. And no one in that, maybe a handful out of 50 people, maybe 5 of them have actually purchased crypto, right? And these are executives, verified executives that are leading, multi-billion-dollar companies that have not even tested the space. And until they're there, right? I think that's, again, to an earlier point, that is when we will see an inflection point, right? When they start to take it seriously because they see an opportunity that is ripe for their own business.
Yeah. By the way, I've been listening to this week, listening to Kevin Kelly on the Tim Ferriss podcast, and he's a futurist and idea guy, and he writes a ton. And he explained his process in utilizing AI, ChatGPT in his writing. He uses it for like first drafts, and listen to the podcast, an amazing episode. But he thinks of it as his intern, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So like, to your point of like who owns it, I don't know who owns it, but he is creating it. He's definitely feeding the ideas and the structure, and essentially talking to ChatGPT as if it is his intern. And I was just fascinated by that perspective on it. I think a lot of people are going to pick up on that.
Yeah, and I completely agree with that. I use it for drafting. I use, for either first draft or final draft, just to run through, a different version of Grammarly. And I think what we're, let's be clear and let's remember right now kind of who we're dealing with right now is these are centralized services, which I believe the future of AI is going to have a blockchain future. I mean, to me, it is, let me also say this, blockchain was not designed for humans. It's designed for machines. And so the concept of where does AI come in, we could do an entire other show on this. But imagine if you become reliant on an AI tool in any way, shape, or form, and you just, this is what you're doing. You now no longer can say I'm using it for drafts. Like that's what produces the work that you do.
It's your entire staff.
And because it's centralized, and this is a key issue that we need to really start dealing with. What happens if they change the terms and conditions? What happens if they simply say, same as Facebook and Instagram and others, they say, whatever is created here, we have ownership rights to, that we have IP rights to this. That's where I think Siva is really getting into this is, hey, I prompted it. I asked it the questions, but all it takes is one little sentence change or maybe just a single word change in their terms and conditions. We already know they're looking at what we do.
Yeah. So big picture, and I'll let Siva answer this first. Where do you see the tie-in with AI and blockchain?
Well, I made a post on this on LinkedIn. We were speaking at the St. Louis FinTech Summit, and we were talking about emerging technology for fintechs. And right now there is this narrative where AI and blockchain or Web3 are sort of seen as siloed or adjacent industries, but in reality, they are very complementary industries. For AI to achieve its true potential, it would have to live on some sort of blockchain rails, right? Think of some sort of chain that allows an on-ramp of hundreds of different data sources or inputs versus right now where an OpenAI LLM model or something, you're going through one centralized kind of conduit, right? That pipe is only so big, right? But with blockchain or with a decentralized ledger, you have the ability to create a centralized highway with millions of on and off ramps of different data inputs and outputs and sources that an AI as a layer sits above all and can observe and ingest and consume. That's where I see a huge convergence of AI, the intersection of AI and blockchain. And hopefully that makes sense.
That's awesome. Yeah. You want to add anything to that, Jay?
Yeah, I think they're all one and the same. AI is part of Web3. It's the next iteration of the internet. And there's no one that's using this in the physical space. So it's online. And so there you go. It doesn't need to be its own thing. The same as, crypto isn't its own thing. NFTs aren't its own thing. It's part of an ecosystem. And I think that's the way I always want people to talk about it is, think of how this integrates into what we're doing. To me, the exciting part of AI is being able to personalize this using these massive language models that are someone's deciding what's right, what's wrong. I think that's we've heard the dangers of this, and I think that Elon speaks about it quite a bit, and a variety of others. My most exciting part of this is how do you truly secure something that is going to be the most intimately valuable piece of your knowledge. So if I said, hey, and remember, I still am one of these like security conscious people, so I understand some people don't care. If I want to hook an AI model into, my phone, my text messages, my emails, like everything about my life, because I want it to know me and I want it to be able to respond to me and tell me things that I've learned in the past or I want to remember, and these are my sources. Blockchain is going to be the best technology to be able to say, these are mine. I no longer want to use this service to render them anymore. I want to plug in a different service over here. So it's the same as, a traditional staking model. If I want to stake my ETH on these nodes over here, and I can't unstake them now, but, I suddenly don't like the terms and conditions, or I don't like the person that's providing that. Theoretically, I can just go restake them somewhere else. It's still mine. I never had to sell them. And I think take that same concept and say, where does my data is going to be more valuable than any shitcoin that exists, and that's going to be me, and that's going to live on forever. And so where can I store that? And I think that we've solved some of these problems, but I think there's still a long way to go on making it secure enough.
Yeah. Not just assets, but also identity. Particularly with burgeoning technology in artificial rendering of audio, video, everything. For something to be verified as DSide's actual identity, it would have to be coming from my wallet or my seal of approval or my, basically saved through my blockchain identity. At least I need, like, that needs to happen.
100%.
That's a great example. I mean, if we took that and kind of fleshed it out a little bit, like let's say DSide, you say, hey, I would love for my voice to be used in a variety of different mediums. Right. I just want to be incentivized for that, right? And one of the big central tenets of Web3 is ownership of my data, right? Read, write, and then own, right? And so if there was a way, and I know a couple of companies that are working on this, but if we got to a point where DSide had my inventory of my voice or my assets, because my voice is my personal asset, right? It doesn't get any more personal than that. Sure. And within some sort of Web3 capability, I basically token gated access to X, Y, and Z apps to go and say, yes, you can use my voice. These are the fees or the terms of you using my voice, royalties, licenses, whatever. All reinforced by a smart contract, managed thresholds defined within the contract, and then boom. Now, without ever having to touch it, and maybe by the switch of a toggle switch, I can say DSide allowed his voice to be used on this SoundCloud rapper's a sample, and I was incentivized for that. And there's a full record, a full immutable ledger of that history saying that I granted this guy to use my voice on this sample, and I was compensated appropriately for it. And that's a great example of where, hey, maybe now there is an AI capability there, and now I can token get an AI to go and pull from an inventory of, generative assets, digital assets, vocal assets, what have you, right? And again, I think these things just play together really well. No one's really, or maybe they are, but I mean, no one's really pushing that narrative right now.
Yeah, well, so interesting you bring that up, because I think it's going to happen very quickly. Look, so two examples. One, today, I think I saw a post about an AI generated new album from Biggie Smalls. Biggie's been dead for 10 years, right?
Yep.
Someone also did a Joe Rogan podcast where he was interviewed by, I think, an AI bot, and it just took like his recordings and AI generated his responses. He needs to own that, right? I mean, and that's definitely going to accelerate where blockchain comes in.
Yeah, and I think take a second and we'll just push AI to the side for a second because it's hogging too much space on a blockchain podcast right now. The concepts that get me really excited is that digital ID, that idea that I can own my identity. Because right now, you don't, and it doesn't matter. You are given permission. You can log into Facebook and Twitter and all these different social media platforms, and they're going to give you space of which you can create a profile, and they may let you download your data and run away with it, especially if you're in the EU. They'll the right to be forgotten. But you can't hold these. You can't control these. There's no one that's thinking about like, what? Jay just walked into McDonald's. He bought a cheeseburger, and as soon as I tap my credit card, or I bought it, it just automatically puts some McDonald's points in my crypto wallet. You walk into Starbucks and they just automatically know how to connect and say, here's the thing I'm going to give you. And then from there, that's that idea that I can own it. I can take it. I can do whatever I want with it, sell them, buy them, trade them, use them. But it's too hard right now. Like it's really hard. I mean, we teach classes all the time on hey, ENS is one of our preferred partners, and we work with them all the time. And I got to say, they're doing an amazing job of trying to solve this challenge and problem. But they're still struggling for use cases. Like you're still struggling with like, I can do this thing, but then there's like hundreds of people around the world that will use it with me. It's like if you don't have a friend in crypto, you're kind of, that's why these exist. That's why these online communities are so prevalent. It's because we don't know anyone in our normal day-to-day lives that are using this.
Right.
I mean, think about this. And this is probably not publicly known unless if you're in the industry. Did you know the DMV makes money off of your data in the DMV of all the paperwork that you submit? They then go and sell access to that data to a myriad of companies that want that data to attest against you as potential outbound marketing channels, right? I know this because one of my clients is one of the companies that actually purchases this data. But why should that data even reside within the DMV? Why should it be centrally located in some outdated, antiquated Cobalt mainframe? Because we know the Fed is not on, AWS or anything of that nature, right? That's too advanced. But, they have this access to they have this centralized database of my personal data attributes that I see no incentivization or ownership of. And they are going and making millions selling that to private companies for them to go and maybe send 15 more emails to my 3 Gmail accounts, right? Of products or things that I don't care about. Or we could get to a state and the technology is there. The problem is when in consulting, we always say people, process, and technology. The technology has the ability to fulfill a lot of the theoretical capabilities we're talking today. That a lot of people have proven it. But what hasn't happened is the people and process. Regulatory hasn't entered and the right people have not entered the conversation. But I should, in theory, today, with a lot of technology capabilities, have a simple app on my phone where I say, hey, DMV, Missouri, St. Louis DMV, you need this access to this because I need to go register this car. Okay, yeah, I own this Tesla, I own this car, and blah, 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 blah. You will have access for it for 24 hours. Go and give me my new registration or my new title. Boom. Then I turn off that access. We could do that. You could do that in Web 2 today with REST APIs, right? It's just not efficient, but you could do it, right? So why can't we do that? Because we aren't incentivizing the intermediaries. And I think that's the bigger conversation here. The nature of all of our industries in current state are reliant on the fact that intermediaries are necessary to facilitate end-to-end transactions from a financial perspective, from a process perspective, from a fulfillment perspective. I think a big reason why the SEC, personal reason why the SEC is on a warpath is they're trying to figure out their prime player or prime partner, the intermediaries, which is the banks. How do we make sure that they're not forgotten or disrupted as part of this new wave of technology, right? Because we have proven with smart contracts that anything that requires human touch can be automated and automatically fulfilled. but no one's really established the right governance models around these. No one's really established the security risk, right? We've seen a couple of private funds get, attacked and funds taken, right? A couple of years ago. And so the technology is there, but the right people are not in the conversation to really propel the industry forward.
Great take. And, I think folks like Coinbase, Brian Armstrong at Coinbase and others who will hop on that. They kind of want to see, Brian like push things forward and see how let him take some flack first and see what the pushback is like. Ultimately, I think he'll become very powerful in that conversation and get a lot of backing. And you're right. I mean, ultimately, banks don't want to become meaningless, especially as some people consider them to be an arm of the federal government, essentially. So they have to protect the U.S. dollar and protect the finances of this country. I mean, lots of incentives in that respect.
Yeah, and I think here's the way we look at things, and I understand that a majority of people are going to have a different thought and different approach.
Yeah.
But banks should be crypto's best friend. Banks should be welcome to open arms with blockchain. And let me be clear, they're all working on this, but they don't understand, and they've been kind of pushed aside as like, you're going to be irrelevant. You're going to be the next blockbuster. It's just these empty shells. And let me just say this: most people should not be entrusted to manage and hold their own finances. Like this is like, I know people, and we've seen it. I'm sure you report it all the time. Some of the most knowledgeable and degens on the planet are getting hacked and losing all of their fortunes, everything there. So the concept of like, how do we just take banks and making it optional? That if someone says like, I want to move my mom and have her engage and have some cryptocurrencies, that I think that Bitcoin is a better store of value than gold or, treasury bonds and everything else. But giving your mom a little plastic ledger is not a good idea. And I'm going to argue that it's not a good idea for me or any of us on this call either. That the thought of like our total, like our retirement and everything else being in these little pieces of plastic or seed keys that are floating around, it's just not correct. And so I think that Fireblocks and a bunch of others have done a really good job of like, creating these mountains of kind of like, of ways to take custody and to kind of decentralize it in a little bit so that you have recovery and you have, a third party that's available. And if you've never used Fireblocks, like, it's amazing. I think it's one of those things, like it's the F1 car right now, that we want to see that technology like filter all the way down to the Toyota Corolla. But it's just going to take some time and some innovation, because I see everything. I've seen everything that people are saying it's just as good, it's better. And I'm going to say it's not. There's a reason why it's $60,000 a year, is because an institution wants somebody that's that gatekeeper to their fund. So I think that there's a long way to go, but I think that, the biggest point I want to make is, let's start embracing these players that have all the clients to onboard. Banks have, billions of clients around the world. Now there's a lot of people that are unbanked, and we can deal with them the same in a different way. Sure. But if you want the United States to become a leader again in this, it's going to be by showing the banks, here's how to do it, and working with them, not against them.
Yeah. Can we go back to another subject, Jay? I want to talk about ENS for a second. Okay. You brought it up before. What do you see as the major use case, at least in the next few years? And what else? So what can we expect from ENS?
So here's the problem: it is ENS.
If you could also just give a little background on ENS.
Yeah. So Ethereum name service is designed to be, like in the olden days, when I wanted to go to a server on Web 1, the first way was I would tell my modem a phone number, and it would dial that phone number. And then there was another modem on the other end that would like pick up and connect to the server. Right. Then we solved this with TCP/IP a little bit, to where you could put in an address, the 128 and then it would resolve from there. But again, for those of you that don't remember, having post-it notes on the side of your computer with all these various IP addresses and little notes of what they were, it got old real quick. That's exactly what we're seeing right now with the OX blah 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 stuff. So ENS, and there's a couple others that did this. They said, look, let's resolve this and create kind of a centralized, DNS type server, where you can have, yWhales.eth or DSide.eth. I'm guessing that's yours. And that it just goes and it just works. But what I think that they're doing really cool now is that you can also connect websites to your ENS. So you can go ahead, and if you've got, yWhales.com can be connected to my Ethereum name service, so that I can just tell people, don't even worry about the .eth. Just, you can send money direct, you can send Ethereum tokens or any ECR20 to yWhales.com using whatever service you want, and it still resolves back to where it's supposed to go. So to me, I think it's a good first step towards identity management online, but there's some pretty big problems. It only works if you're on the Ethereum, the Ethereum blockchain. If you go over to Solana, they've got their own thing. If you go to like something like Proton Chain, they'll sell you a .eth address all over again, and a .btc again. So there's no centralized, and this is where regulation comes in, because regulation solves these things. I know everyone hates it and they don't want to think about it, but the reason why we have a single set of .coms and .nets and everything else is because of ICANN, because they came out and said there's going to be one centralized repository for all these. Here's the rules of the game. You can be a player, you can sell them, but you're all going to play by these rules of the game, and we're going to audit you and make sure you're compliant for consumer protections.
Is that regulation or standardization? Is that actually legal regulation, ICANN?
It's a little of both. So they're standardizing it through regulation. So it's forced. You cannot, because again, if you don't regulate it, then people say, I just don't want to play by that. I'll just go make my own.
Yeah.
And maybe that's enforcement from.
Sorry, we lost you there a little, Siva. Jay, can you still hear me talking?
Yeah, you're still there.
Okay.
Siva's Dropbox just syncs.
Yes, we can.
Go for it. That was weird. I was gonna say ENS has that. Is it still freezing?
Siva, you're still glitching. I have a question for Jay though. Yeah. ENS recently released their yes sir name wrapper, right? The technology that enables essentially any owner of an ENS domain to be able to share subdomains or resell subdomains. Where do you see that going? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think that you're going to see a myriad of projects rolling out from that team. Corey Whitaker is their current CEO. He is a extremely dynamic business entrepreneur, and they take their DAO, their community, extremely serious. So there is if you're interested in this type of thing, I can tell you they are absolutely trailblazing on some of the concepts around this. The challenge that I think everyone's dealing with is what works and what doesn't work. And so, if you want to have, if I want to have a bunch of subdomains of yWhales.eth, yWhales.com, again, it's yours, do what you want with it. We haven't really addressed fraud very well in Web3. And the concept of decentralized governance, everyone's on your own, that's where, and again, we'll hit 3 trillion again. We may hit 4 trillion, but if we want that 100, 200, 300 trillion dollars, we got to find a way to do this better. And we got to be able to set rules of the game that protect consumers. And I hate to say that's at the disadvantage of some of the OGs to be able to take advantage of the newbies that are coming into the system.
Yeah. Did you want to add something to that, Siva?
Oh, I was just going to say on the topic of ENS, I think where ENS has a first mover advantage is to sort of set the tables of what would be the equivalent of like a Rosetta Stone for Web3 and from communication protocols, right? Getting everyone talking in the same language, right? When we think about regulatory or agency enforcement, as Jay was mentioning, I think it's something similar in nature to kind of in the US, like let's talk about cars, for example. Right now, there's a standard mode of a method of fuel or version of fuel for everyone to offer at every gas station, and that you are, unless if it's a shady station, right? But everyone generally knows the octane and the clarity and the quality of it and all that stuff, right? You don't go, if I have a Mercedes, I don't go specific to Shell. If I have a BMW, I go specific to Mobil, right? Right now, there is no kind of regulation or agency oversight from the EV market here. If I'm a Tesla, I have to go and charge at Tesla superchargers. If I'm a Chevy Volt or a Nissan Leaf, I think in the US, I use charge points or something of that nature, right? But there isn't someone that has enforced some sort of law or protocol or something to say everyone should communicate on this protocol or use this electric plug to make sure that the environment is better for every consumer that's going to enter in this space. I think ENS has the opportunity, especially when you think of all these crazy alphanumeric addresses that everyone's dealing with. And let's be honest, man, like 60-year-olds, 50-year-olds, 40-year-olds, 30-year-olds, like I can't even remember my wife's phone number right now. And now I have to worry about, I might have 100K in Ethereum locked to this alphanumeric code that if I mess up how I send it or who I send it to, it could be instantly lost, and it's not FDIC backed or anything. So that money is poof, right? That's an environment of risk that is not appetizing for anyone. I think ENS has a potential opportunity here to be sort of that, in decentralized exchanges, there's this concept of DEX aggregators. ENS has the opportunity to become a multi-chain aggregator of communication for everyone to start talking to one another, regardless of what chain you choose. And that's beautiful, right? In data structures and traditional and enterprise environments, we consider technologies like that considered like iPaaS layers or middleware layers, where they are the syndicators to make sure that everything is talking to one another, regardless of where your data or who you're talking to. There's a centralized oracle, so to speak, that makes sure everyone's speaking the same language. And I think ENS, because they are the first pioneer and obviously have the most traction, has that opportunity to sort of be that oracle communication layer of standardization for the entire blockchain industry, so to speak.
Yeah, that's pretty visionary. I like that. We're running long. This has been a great conversation. I usually wrap up these any interviews with a question to guests on if you could work on any project, what would it be? Now you guys have already told me about the future of we've talked about for the past hour almost, like the future and what could happen and what might be happening. But real specifically, if there were a project that you can just dream up or that you know of, what would be your dream project, Siva?
Actually, what I would do is I would take a version of a project that we're currently engaged on, but shifting the industry. I would love to tackle the data problem in healthcare, mainly because I love data, or not actual data, but the data structures. And I truly believe blockchain as a capability has the ability to remove a lot of the end user patient care, a lot of the friction, a lot of the waste. If we're thinking Six Sigma here, waste that is just occurring in the end-to-end, patient care workflow could completely be streamlined by, maybe a cacophony of private healthcare chains to make sure we adhere to GDPR and PII and all that good stuff, right? And inject some ZK proofs. And now DSide, I know that you have XYZ symptoms, but I don't necessarily need to know it's you because the ZK proof has obfuscated your identity, but I know you are patient A exhibiting these symptoms, and you can talk to this doctor and they can readily prescribe you something without ever really knowing who you are. And you can do that in 30 minutes. Man, think of how revolutionary that could be, right?
Solid. I like that. I'm a physical therapist by training. I owned a PT practice for 16 years. And I could see the benefits of that from the provider side as well. So, that doc who is prescribing also gets paid at the end of that transaction, as opposed to sending out a bill to an insurance company and waiting 90 days to get paid.
Yeah, I mean, imagine this, and I'll stop because I know Jay has really good thoughts here.
Give Jay a chance.
one of my good friends here is an ER surgeon, and a lot of my close friends are doctors. So I see it from their perspective. And I imagine, imagine you're an ER doctor, you're on call at 9 p.m. and you're in rural Oklahoma or rural Missouri, where I'm from. And you have someone, Jay comes stumbling in and he's disheveled and you don't know what's happening to him. You have no idea. And you have to, within 5 minutes or within 30 seconds, life or death, have to basically make a quick assessment of this individual to recommend a course of remedy or at least do something, right? Imagine if I had access to Jay's singular health profile. It was obfuscated, ZK proofed, or stealth identified, or whatever you want to say. And now I have a full recollection. Okay, Jay's on these prescriptions. Jay's seen these providers. Jay has this medical history without ever knowing the personal information of him, but just seeing the medically relevant data. And I can do a quick assessment in 30 or 40 or 50 seconds. And now I have more information to make a better recommended solution or mode of care for Jay to potentially have a better outcome. That is a huge potential that is not set up today, right? And there is a huge opportunity. But again, you have to talk to the providers. That has to come from the hospital systems. That has to come from the carriers. All these individuals need to be talking to each other to make sure that this capability comes to fruition. And that's what's missing right now in our industry.
That's awesome. As long as Jay doesn't have to carry his ledger around with him for that to happen.
Yeah.
But that's something we have to solve for, right? Or someone has to solve for.
Oh, absolutely. And I think one of the coolest ones that we know that exists today is Burst IQ. Burst IQ is a chain designed to be HIPAA compliant, and we've done a couple podcasts with those guys about especially about the difference between public blockchain and private blockchain, because it's a private blockchain. So it's permission, but it does utilize a lot of the decentralized principles. So yeah, I love that. You want me to rattle off?
Absolutely. Dream project.
So I don't need to have a dream project, because that's what I get to do. So as I get to run this massive ecosystem with thousands of people around the world, that funding is not always easy, but it's usually there right around the corner. We're building probably one of the least sexy projects in Web3, which is capital markets as a service and regulatory compliance as a service. So everyone can build fiat on and off ramps, but they don't, because they don't have banking licenses. They don't understand the compliance space. And so we're really getting ready to launch a product here within the next probably 60 days, if even that really just brings that kind of just plug in. We manage all the KYC, AML, OFAC compliance, fiat on and off ramps, everything. And this scales all the way up to the largest exchanges, all the way down to some of the smallest projects, and really creates that kind of cohesion where can't do it in the United States right now, but going over into the EU and a variety of other entities that we have the software, it's already done, plugs in, it's auditable, everything's there. So to me, the biggest problem is to solve that I find insanely is just to free the projects and the developers and the people that are listening to this to focus on the client adoption. And this is very similar to, the server closets of the 90s that I go back to. So I have this different approach where if in the mid 90s, your business wanted to have a website, you had to drag fiber into your building. You had to build a server closet. You had to bring people in. Right. And then eventually over time, we moved to co-location facilities where they were better set up and designed to this, and then eventually up to the SaaS model. And so that's essentially what we're doing, is we're just saying we can offboard that. We can provide those services that are needed to be regulatory compliant and allow you to focus on clients and your clients' experience. So that's what we're working on. And I've been on it for about 3 years now. So hopefully soon here.
Awesome. And Jay's being a little humble about it. It's to his point. I mean, it is a dream project. It is the centralized data highway for financial institutions to communicate with one another, for market makers to transact with one another, buy side, sell side, and it is EU compliant. That is huge. That's a dream project. And so that's just one of a few that we're doing in yWhales. Nice.
That's awesome. Full disclosure, at the end of this podcast now, I didn't know what I was getting into. I didn't know what we were going to talk about. I didn't know what direction this podcast was going to go in, and it was awesome. You guys are deep in the weeds, and it's amazing to have conversations like this. So I really appreciate you guys taking the time.
We appreciate you hanging out, and we're happy to come back anytime. And this is what we do every single day. And like I said, this is the first time I've been interviewed in a long time. Normally it's me in your seat. So I appreciate taking the pressure off.
Nice. Yeah, you guys are loose. You're cool. yWhales.com. And where else can people find you?
So we're on YouTube, Spotify. We have yWhales.com is kind of the hub for everything else. But yeah, we're all over the place. We do meetups at almost every major convention. We had a bunch of people at where it was Consensus, and then I know we'll be permissionless. Bitcoin Miami, I think, is in about 2 weeks. So yeah, any major kind of crypto/finance conference, there's usually a meetup of us happening.
Nice. Yeah, I look forward to, I'll be a permissionless. Look forward to meeting you guys in person there. And thanks for inviting me on the yWhales podcast. I think that's coming up in about a month.
Yeah, we'll trade you. We'll trade you. Put you in the hot seat.
Excellent.
Flip the script.
Flip the script. Thanks for taking the time. I appreciate it. It's been a great episode, and talk to you guys soon.
Thanks, man.
Awesome. Thank you, man.
Bye.
Do we stay on here?